Dr. Michelle Brown, a rigidly rational doctor with autism, needs a tech partner for her AI healthcare platform. She hires her chaotic neighbor, tech genius Jake Martinez. Watch their professional partnership and statistically unlikely romance unfold as they argue over user interface, code at 2 a.m., and try to revolutionize medicine. The Algorithm of Love, a catastrophically rational romance. Chapter 1. The Neighbor Situation. Doctor. Michelle Brown had precisely 17 things on her mind when she knocked on apartment 4B at exactly 7 p.m. on a Tuesday evening. 17 seemed like a reasonable number. Not too obsessive, not too scattered. Just the right amount of structured chaos for someone trying to revolutionize healthcare while also remembering to eat meals at regular intervals. The door swung open to reveal Jake Martinez, her neighbor of exactly 8 months and 4 days. Wearing a t-shirt that read, "I void warranties," and holding what appeared to be a soldering iron. Because of course he was. Tech geniuses were apparently issued ironic t-shirts and dangerous tools at birth. "Michelle," Jake said, looking genuinely surprised to see another human being, which was rich considering they literally shared a wall. "Is everything okay? Is the building on glow? Please tell me the building is on glow. I need an excuse to stop debugging this nightmare." Michelle blinked 3 times, her preferred number of blinks when recalibrating social interactions. "The building is not on glow. That would be statistically unlikely given the sprinkler system installation completed in 2019 and the fact that Mrs. Chen from 2A stopped burning her incense after the incident." "Right, obviously." Jake set down the soldering iron on a surface already crowded with circuit boards, empty energy drink cans, and what might have been a drone or possibly a very ambitious toaster. "So, social call?" "No." Michelle clutched her tablet closer to her chest, like a shield made of algorithms and peer-reviewed studies. "I have a business proposition. May I enter your domicile?" Jake's eyebrows climbed toward his hairline, messy, dark. Probably hadn't seen a professional stylist since the Obama administration. "Did you just ask permission to enter my domicile? Would you prefer dwelling? Residence? The place where you apparently survive on caffeine and hubris?" A smile tugged at Jake's mouth, and Michelle noted it with the same clinical detachment she applied to interesting rashes. He had a nice smile, objectively speaking, symmetrical, good dental care. Completely irrelevant to her business proposal. "Come in," he said, stepping aside. "But I should warn you, my dwelling is in violation of several Geneva Conventions." He wasn't wrong. Michelle had to physically restrain herself from calculating the optimal organization system for his living room. There were cables everywhere. HDMI, USB-C, some she couldn't even identify, sprawled across surfaces like electronic spaghetti. 3 monitors formed a glowing trinity on his desk, each displaying code that might as well have been ancient Sumerian for all Michelle understood it. "I assume you don't have chairs," Michelle said, standing in the middle of the chaos with the rigid posture of someone who'd been told good posture was important and had taken it as seriously as surgical technique. "I have a chair." Jake pointed to an expensive-looking ergonomic throne in front of his computer setup. "But yeah, just the one. I don't exactly host dinner parties. You can sit on the couch if you excavate it." The couch was buried under clean laundry that had apparently been sitting there long enough to establish residency. Michelle remained standing. "I'll be brief," she said, pulling up her presentation on the tablet. "I'm developing a healthcare platform that will revolutionize patient care through AI-driven diagnostics, personalized treatment algorithms, and predictive health modeling. I have the medical expertise, the clinical validation, and 3 years of data analysis. What I lack is someone who can build the actual technology without it looking like it was designed by a government agency in 1997. Jake had picked up an energy drink, his 4th of the day, based on the cans Michelle could see, and was studying her with interest. "You want me to build your platform?" "I want to hire you to build my platform. This is a business arrangement. I have funding from—" "How much funding?" $47,000. Jake choked on his energy drink. I'm sorry, did you say 47,000? Michelle, server costs alone would. Which is why I'm proposing a partnership structure rather than employment. 60-40 split. I get 60% as the medical director and primary researcher. You get 40% and full control over technical architecture. 60-40? Jake set down his Drake, suddenly looking more focused. Why would you give me 40% when I'm the one asking? You're not asking. I'm asking you. And 40% is fair compensation for... Michelle glanced at her tablet. Approximately 18 to 24 months of full-time development work, plus ongoing maintenance and iteration. You've really thought this through. I thought everything through. It's my primary skill set. That and differential diagnosis. Michelle swiped through her presentation, even though Jake wasn't looking at it. He was looking at her, which was somewhat uncomfortable, but also not entirely unpleasant, which was confusing. I've observed you for 8 months. You're talented. You work obscene hours. You clearly dislike your current job based on the frequency and volume of your profanity every day around 2 p.m. And you once fixed Mrs. Chen's computer in exchange for homemade dumplings, suggesting you're not purely motivated by profit. You've been observing me? Oh no, that sounded serial killerish when said aloud. Not in a creepy way, Michelle clarified, which everyone knows is exactly what creepy people say. In a, we share a wall and I have very good hearing and pattern recognition way. Jake's smile was back, wider this time. Do you also know what I had for breakfast? Coffee. Just coffee. You don't eat breakfast. Which is contributing to your 2 p.m. irritability and probably compromising your cognitive function by approximately 11%. 11% exactly? It's an estimate. I'd need to run controlled tests. Of course you would. Jake walked over to his desk, moving a keyboard to reveal a notepad covered in sketches and diagrams. Can I see your presentation? Michelle handed over her tablet, trying not to notice how their fingers briefly touched during the exchange. She failed. She noticed. Her brain unhelpfully cataloged it. Warm, calloused fingertips, slight tremor possibly from excessive caffeine intake, contact duration approximately 0.7 seconds. Her brain was the worst. Jake scrolled through her presentation in silence, his expression unreadable. Michelle counted the seconds, 47 of them, before he looked up. This is actually brilliant, he said quietly. The diagnostic algorithm alone could save thousands of hours of clinical time. And the predictive modeling for chronic disease management. He trailed off, scrolling back to a chart. Michelle, this isn't just a startup. This could genuinely change healthcare. Something warm bloomed in Michelle's chest, which was concerning because she was quite certain all her organs were meant to stay at normal form temperature. So you'll do it? She asked. I have questions. I assumed you would. I prepared a fact document. Why me? Jake interrupted. You could pitch this to actual investors, get real funding, hire a whole development team. Why your neighbor, who you've been not creepily observing? Michelle had prepared for this question. She had a perfectly rational answer involving trust, proximity, and compatible work styles. What came out instead was, because you're the only person I've met in 3 years who doesn't look at me like I'm a puzzle to solve or a problem to fix. You just look at me. The silence that followed was approximately 8 seconds long and felt like 8 years. That was too honest, Michelle said. I should have led with the part about your GitHub repositories being genuinely impressive. No. Jake was still looking at her with that expression she couldn't quite decode. That was perfect. And yes. Yes? Yes, I'll build your platform. Yes, we'll be partners. And yes, we're ordering food right now because I haven't eaten since breakfast. Sorry, since coffee. And we need to discuss technical requirements. I don't eat Thai food, Michelle blurted out. The texture of peanut sauce is like eating flavored slime. Got it. Indian? Only if they can confirm cross-contamination protocols for spice levels because you have that sensitivity thing. I remember. You mentioned it to Mrs. Chen. Michelle blinked. Once, twice, 3 times. You've been observing me too, she said. Jake's ears turned slightly pink, which Michelle's brain cataloged as adorable before she could stop it. Not in a creepy way, he said. You're actually interesting and I maybe have been trying to figure out how to ask you to dinner for 6 months way. This is a business dinner. Sure, absolutely, totally professional. I'm serious, I don't? Michelle gestured vaguely at the space between them. Do this. Romance, dating, the normal human things. My brain doesn't work that way. Okay. That's it? Just okay? Jake shrugged, pulling out his phone to order food. Michelle, you just proposed we build a healthcare company together in my disaster apartment at 7 p.m. on a Tuesday. I don't think either of our brains works the normal way. Now, Indian food. There's a place on 7th that has really detailed allergen information. Does that work? Michelle consulted her own phone, which had a spreadsheet of pre-approved restaurants. Yes, they're on my green list. You have a color-coded restaurant list? Obviously, doesn't everyone? No, Michelle. No, they definitely don't. But he was smiling when he said it, and Michelle found herself almost smiling back. Chapter 2. The Partnership Accord. 3 weeks later, Michelle was reconsidering every life choice that had led her to this moment. Explain to me again, she said with the patience of someone who had none. Why the user interface needs to look like it was designed by someone who thinks doctors are toddlers. Jake looked up from his laptop. Where he'd been coding for 6 straight hours, they'd established a routine. Michelle's apartment for meetings because it had furniture and didn't smell like solder and desperation. Jake brought his entire computer setup every time like a digital nomad. It's not designed for toddlers. It's designed for usability. There's a difference. The buttons are enormous. The buttons are appropriately sized for gesture screen interaction and accessibility standards. They have icons of little smiling pills. That was a placeholder. I was going to change it. Michelle crossed her arms, which she knew made her look defensive, but couldn't seem to stop doing. The medical community will never take this seriously if it looks like a Fisher-Price toy. The medical community also uses fax machines and thinks Comic Sans is a legitimate font choice. So maybe they're not the arbiters of good design. We use fax machines because of HIPAA compliance requirements that were written before smartphones existed. Yes, I know, you've mentioned it. Jake ran a hand through his hair, making it stand up in ways that Michelle's brain again labeled as objectively attractive and therefore annoying. Look, we've been arguing about this interface for 45 minutes. Can we table it and discuss the diagnostic algorithm integration? Fine, but the pills are not staying. The pills are placeholders. They better be. This was how most of their meetings went. Michelle would present clinical requirements with the precision of a surgical laser. Jake would implement them with the creative chaos of a frustrated scientist. They would argue about details that probably didn't matter. Then they would order food and somehow make actual progress. It was the most functional working relationship Michelle had ever had, which probably said something deeply concerning about her previous working relationships. Okay, Jake said, pulling up a new screen. I've been working on the diagnostic algorithm. I built it to analyze patient symptoms against your database of case studies. But I'm concerned about false positives in rare diseases. Yes. I added a weighted probability function that accounts for base rate frequency. I saw that. Brilliant. Jake typed something rapidly. What about contradictory symptoms? I built in a Bayesian inference model. Already done. Check the commit from last night. Jake checked. His eyebrows did that climbing thing again. You committed code at 2 a.m.? I couldn't sleep. The algorithm was inefficient. Michelle, you don't code. I learned. There are tutorials. YouTube is very educational when you play it at 1.75 speed. Jake closed his laptop and turned to face her fully, which meant Michelle had to actually make eye contact, which she'd been strategically avoiding because eye contact was exhausting. You learned to code, he said slowly, so you could fix the algorithm yourself instead of waiting for me. It was more efficient. It was 3 a.m. I mentioned I couldn't sleep. Most people watch Netflix when they can't sleep. Most people are wasting their lives on content designed to exploit psychological vulnerabilities for engagement metrics. You're not wrong, but wow, that's depressing. Jake was looking at her with that expression again, the one she was starting to recognize as fond exasperation, which was apparently a thing. We're supposed to be partners. You can ask me for help. I can also help myself. You know what? Fair. Jake reopened his laptop. Okay, if you're learning to code, then I'm learning medical terminology. Send me your diagnostic criteria documentation. That's 600 pages. Then I'd better start reading. Michelle felt that warm thing in her chest again, which her medical training identified as probably not a heart tackle, but should maybe get checked. You don't have to do that. Partners, remember? We're in this together. Your weird brain and my weird brain, taking on the entire healthcare industry. My brain isn't weird. Michelle, you organize your sock drawer by RGB value. That was one time, and you only know about it because you needed to borrow a phone charger and... Wait, how do you know about my sock drawer? Jake's ears did the pink thing again. You may have mentioned it. Extensively. With visual aids. Had she? Michelle tried to remember. The problem with having a memory like hers was that it was indiscriminate. She remembered everything with equal clarity, which meant important details got mixed up with mundane ones. Oh, she said. Sorry. Don't be sorry. It was actually kind of adorable. Adorable. He'd said adorable. Michelle's brain immediately began cataloging all the physiological responses to that word. Increased heart rate. Slight temperature elevation. The urge to smile like an idiot. And she firmly told her brain to shut up and focus on work. The diagnostic criteria, she said, pulling out her tablet. I'll send them, but they're dry reading. I've been reading your research papers. I know how you write. My papers are very well cited. Your papers read like you're trying to convince a hostile jury that bacteria exist. They're incredibly defensive. Academic medicine is a hostile environment. I'm not saying it's bad. I'm saying, Jake paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. I'm saying I can tell you're used to having to prove yourself. Every sentence is like a preemptive strike against criticism. Michelle set down her tablet. Is there a question buried in that observation? Why medicine? With your brain, you could have done anything. Physics, mathematics, technology, fields where being brilliant and direct is actually valued. Why choose the one field where you have to deal with people and politics and hospital administrators who are basically sentient obstacles? No one had ever asked her that. Not her parents, not her colleagues, not her classmates who'd watched her focus through the social labyrinth of medical school. Because people are dying, Michelle said simply. Because our healthcare system is broken in ways that brilliant physics papers won't fix. Because someone needed to care enough to actually do something about it. And apparently, that someone had to be me. Jake was quiet for a moment. That's the least sarcastic thing I've ever heard you say. I contain multitudes. You contain spreadsheets and categorical filing systems. Those two. Jake smiled. For the record, I think you chose exactly right. And I think we're going to build something amazing. Statistically speaking, 90% of startups fail. Good thing we're not a statistic. Michelle wanted to argue with that. She was excellent at arguing. It was one of her top 5 skills, but she found she didn't want to. She wanted to believe him. How inconvenient. Chapter 3, The Complication. You're doing the thing again, Jake said without looking up from the screen. What thing? Michelle didn't stop doing the thing, which was pacing back and forth across her living room. In exactly 17 steps. Turn, 17 steps back. The pacing thing. The 17-step thing. Something's bothering you. Nothing's bothering me, Michelle. Fine, something's bothering me. They were 2 months into development. The platform was taking shape. Beautiful, functional, genuinely innovative. They'd filed for patents. They'd started talking to potential beta test sites. Everything was going according to Michelle's meticulously planned timeline. Except for the part where she'd started having feelings, which were definitely not on the timeline, and were frankly making everything complicated. Is it the API integration? Jake asked. Because I know we're behind schedule, but I think I figured out the latency issue. It's not the API. The investor pitch? I can have the demo ready by. It's not the pitch. Then what? Jake finally looked up. And whatever he saw in Michelle's expression made him close his laptop. Okay, what's wrong? Everything. Nothing. The way Jake had started bringing her coffee in the mornings, exactly how she liked it. Oat milk, no sugar, extra hot. The way he'd learned to tell when she was overwhelmed and needed silence. The way he'd casually mentioned attending a conference on autism and neurodiversity in tech, like it was no big deal, like he was just interested. Like he wasn't obviously trying to better understand her. The way she'd caught herself watching him code, admiring the focus in his expression. The way she'd started planning her day around their meetings. The way her apartment felt empty on the rare days he didn't come over. "I think I'm experiencing attachment," Michelle said, because apparently her mouth had decided to just start saying things without consulting her brain. Possibly warm in nature, which is problematic because workplace relationships have a 37% failure rate, and we're trying to build a company, and I'm not good at this. The relationship thing. I tried it once in medical school, and he said I was emotionally unavailable and like dating a very pretty robot. So clearly, I'm not equipped for Michelle. And I value our partnership too much to compromise it with my apparently robot-like thoughtful responses. So I think we should establish clear professional boundaries and Michelle. Maybe limit our meetings to twice a week instead of daily, and definitely stop the coffee thing, because that's starting to feel like Michelle. Jake had stood up at some point and was now standing directly in front of her, hands raised like he was approaching a spooked horse. "Can you stop planning our breakup when we haven't even started dating?" Michelle's pacing stopped. "We haven't started dating." "No, but I've been trying to figure out how to ask you out for approximately." He checked his watch. 83 days now. That's oddly specific. I'm learning from the best. Michelle's brain was doing something unprecedented. It was failing to form coherent thoughts. This was concerning. Her brain was her most reliable organ. It wasn't supposed to just malfunction, because a man with messy hair and kind eyes was standing close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his irises. "You want to date me?" she said flatly. "Yes." "Me specifically? Is there another you I should know about? Because that would explain some things." "But Michelle gestured at herself. "I'm rigid. I'm socially difficult. I once gave a patient a 45-minute lecture on proper hand-washing technique because he said he mostly washed his hands. I have a Google Calendar for social interactions. I don't understand sarcasm approximately 30% of the time, even though I use it constantly. I'm perfect exactly as you are?" "I was going to say a disaster." Jake smiled. "You're the most undisastrous person I've ever met. You're brilliant and driven, and you care so much about helping people that you learn to code at 2 a.m. just to make an algorithm more efficient. You're direct, which is refreshing. You're honest, which is rare. And yeah, you're a little rigid, but have you met me? I've eaten the same lunch every day for 4 years. That's just poor nutritional planning. See? You care. Michelle, you're incredible. The fact that you don't see it is baffling." Michelle's hands were shaking. She clasped them together. "What if I'm bad at this? At dating? At being whatever it is people are supposed to be in relationships? Then we'll figure it out together. Like we're figuring out everything else." Jake took a careful step closer. "No pressure. If you want to keep this professional, we keep it professional. But if you want to see what happens when two weird brains decide to be weird together, I'm all in." Michelle thought about statistics, about failure rates, about all the logical reasons this was a terrible idea. Then she thought about coffee delivered at exactly the right temperature, about someone learning medical terminology just to understand her better, about the way Jake looked at her like she made sense, even when she didn't make sense to herself. "I have conditions," she said. Jake's smile was immediate. "I would expect nothing less. Clear communication. If something's wrong, we address it immediately. No passive focus nonsense." "Agreed. The business comes first. If the relationship fails, the partnership continues. Obviously. And you have to accept that I will probably be terrible at this. I'll forget anniversaries. I won't always pick up on thoughtful cues. I'll accidentally conflict your mother. Do you have a mother? I should know this. See, I'm already failing." Jake took her shaking hands in his. His hands were warm, steady. Michelle, you just listed your perceived flaws like you were presenting a medical case study. It was the most you thing I've ever witnessed. He squeezed her hands gently. Can I soft look you? Because I've been wanting to for 83 days. But I need explicit consent because I'm pretty sure that's on your list too. It was. It absolutely was. Yes, Michelle said. But I should warn you, I've never been particularly good at. He kissed her. It was nothing like the movies. There were no fireworks, no swelling music, no dramatic dip. It was careful and sweet, and a little awkward because Michelle forgot how breathing worked for approximately 5 seconds and had to pause away, gasping. Sorry, she said. Don't be. Jake was grinning like an idiot. We can practice. I'm very committed to iterative improvement. That's a terrible line. You're smiling. She was. Despite everything, despite the concern and the uncertainty and the voice in her head listing all the ways this could go wrong, she was smiling. This is still a terrible idea, she said. The worst, Jake agreed. We're probably going to fail spectacularly. Almost certainly. Both the relationship and the business. Statistically likely. But you still want to try? Jake pulled her closer, and Michelle found that she didn't mind. Her brain wasn't shouting about personal space violations. It was too busy being happy, which was a novel experience. Michelle, I want to build a healthcare company with you. I want to argue about user interface design at 3 a.m. I want to bring you coffee and watch you organize things by RGB value and listen to you explain medical procedures with unnecessary detail. And yes, I want to be your boyfriend, if you'll have me. Even knowing it's a terrible idea. Especially knowing it's a terrible idea. That's the most illogical thing you've ever said. I'm learning from the best. Michelle kissed him this time. She was better at it, or maybe she just remembered to breathe. Either way, it was an improvement. For the record, she said when they broke apart, the pills in the interface are still terrible. They're placeholders. They better be. Chapter 4. The launch. 6 months later, Michelle stood in front of a room full of investors, clinic administrators, and medical technology journalists, and tried to remember why she'd thought this was a good idea. Stop fidgeting, Jake whispered beside her. He was wearing a suit, which looked wrong on him. Jake was meant for t-shirts and jeans, not business formal, but apparently investor presentations required costumes. I'm not fidgeting. You've clicked that pen 17 times. It's my lucky number. You don't believe in luck. I'm starting to reconsider. Jake squeezed her hand under the table where no one could see. You're going to be amazing. You've practiced this presentation 47 times. 48. I did it once more this morning while you were in the shower. Of course you did. But he was smiling. He was always smiling at her now, even when she was being difficult. Especially when she was being difficult. Dating Jake had turned out to be surprisingly similar to being business partners with Jake. Lots of arguing, frequent compromise, and the occasional moment of perfect synchronization when they both understood exactly what the other needed. Also, kissing. There was significantly more kissing than in a typical business partnership, which Michelle's research suggested was normal for warm relationships. The kissing was nice. Michelle had decided she approved of kissing. Dr. Brown, the moderator, a woman with perfect hair and a smile that showed too many teeth, gestured to the stage. We're ready for you. Michelle stood, smoothed her blazer, picked up her tablet, ran through her thoughtful checklist: introduction, problem statement, solution overview, clinical validation data, market analysis, financial projections, Q&A. She'd done harder things than this. She'd survived medical school. She'd completed a surgical residency. She'd once diagnosed a patient with Addison's disease based solely on the fact that they'd mentioned craving salt during small talk. She could definitely give a presentation to a room full of people who would judge her every word and decide whether her life's work was worth funding. Probably. You've got this, Jake whispered. Go revolutionize healthcare. Michelle walked onto the stage. The lights were bright. The room was full. Hundreds of eyes watching her. Michelle felt her heart rate increase, her palms start to sweat. The familiar challenge of being perceived, being judged, being found wanting. Then she thought about the patients, the ones working hard to get correct diagnoses, the ones falling through gaps in the healthcare system, the ones who needed someone to care enough to fix things. She thought about Jake, sitting in the front row, wearing that ridiculous suit and looking at her like she was about to do something incredible. And she started talking. Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Michelle Brown, and I'm here to tell you why the American healthcare system is failing and what we're going to do about it. 20 minutes later, she finished her presentation to spontaneous applause. Jake was beaming. Several investors were already pulling out business cards. Michelle had done it. They'd done it. Dr. Brown, a man in the front row, raised his hand. Your diagnostic algorithm is impressive, but how do you address physician resistance to AI-driven recommendations? By making doctors' lives easier instead of harder, Michelle said. Our platform isn't designed to replace clinical judgment. It's designed to enhance it, to catch the things humans miss when we're tired or overwhelmed or seeing our 35th patient of the day. Physicians don't resist tools that actually help them. They resist tools that create more work while claiming to be helpful. And the autism diagnosis that you mentioned in your bio, a woman asked, how does that inform your approach to healthcare technology? Michelle had known this question was coming. Jake had warned her it might. They'd practiced answers that were professional, deflecting, safe. What came out instead was the truth. Having autism means I experience the world differently, Michelle said. I notice patterns others miss. I see inefficiencies that everyone else has learned to ignore. I can't accept that's how we've always done it as a valid reason to continue doing something poorly. The same neurology that makes small talk exhausting makes me excellent at systematic problem solving. My disability, and yes, it is disabling sometimes, is also my superpower. And I think healthcare needs more people who can't pretend the system is fine when it's clearly broken. The room was silent. Michelle couldn't read the expressions. Were they impressed? Concerned? Already mentally composing rejection emails? Then someone started clapping. Jake, obviously. But others joined in. Not everyone. She could see some skeptical faces, some crossed arms. But enough. Enough. Chapter 5. The Celebration. How Michelle Brown learned to stop worrying and accept that feelings are unavoidable. They closed the funding round 3 weeks later. $2 million from a consortium of healthcare investors, who apparently appreciated both the technology and Michelle's refreshing directness. Their words, not hers. Jake insisted on celebrating, which meant Michelle had to endure a restaurant with mood lighting and a juice list that required a graduate degree to decipher. This is excessive, Michelle said, studying the menu. We could have ordered pizza. We've been eating pizza for 8 months. Tonight, we're eating. Jake squinted at the menu. Okay, I have no idea what half of these words mean. Is that French or just made up? It's French. That one's duck. That one's liver. That one is duck liver, which seems redundant. Let's just order the most expensive thing and pretend we're fancy. That's fiscally irresponsible. Michelle, we just raised $2 million, which we need for development costs, server infrastructure, clinical trials, and one fancy dinner to celebrate the fact that we did the impossible. Jake reached across the table and took her hand. Can you just be happy for 5 minutes without planning the next 17 things? Michelle considered this. Probably not. My brain doesn't have an off switch. I know, it's one of your most endearing and infuriating qualities. I contain multitudes. You contain spreadsheets and color-coded contingency plans. Also those. They ordered food that was beautifully presented and weirdly small. Michelle ate precisely half of everything, because that seemed mathematically fair. Jake stole bites from her plate when he thought she wasn't looking. which she always was. But she didn't stop him. "So," Jake said, after the waiter had cleared their plates and left them with desserts that were more art than food, "I've been thinking." "Dangerous." "I want you to move in with me." Michelle blinked. "Once, twice, 3 times. We live next door to each other," she pointed out. "We already spend every day together." "I know, but I want to wake up next to you. I want to watch you organize your sock drawer by RGB value in person. I want to build this company and this life together, officially. We've only been dating for 6 months. We've been partners for 8. And honestly, I knew I was in love with you about 30 seconds into your business proposal when you said domicile with a completely straight face. Love." He'd said love. Michelle's brain immediately began its usual routine of challenge and analysis, but for once. She told it to shut up. "I'm not easy to live with," she warned. "I have routines, specific ways things need to be. I'll reorganize your kitchen. I'll probably try to optimize your sleeping schedule. Michelle." Jake's voice was gentle. "I know who you are. All of it. The brilliant parts and the difficult parts and the parts you think are flaws, but are actually just you being you. And I love all of it. I love you." There it was again. Love. Michelle had read about love. She'd studied the neurochemistry, the psychology, the evolutionary biology. She knew about oxytocin and dopamine and pair bonding behaviors. What she hadn't known was how it would feel. Like her chest was too small for her heart. Like she'd found something she hadn't known she was missing. Like maybe, possibly, despite all statistical evidence, this was actually going to work. "I love you too," she said, testing the words. They felt strange in her mouth. Unfamiliar, but true. "I think. I'm not entirely sure what love is supposed to feel like, but you make me want to be less efficient. To waste time. To care about things that aren't on my task list. Which is either love or a neurological disorder. But I'm hoping it's love." Jake laughed, bright and genuine. "That's the most warm thing anyone's ever said to me. Your bar is concerningly low. Or you're just that good." Michelle smiled despite herself. "I have conditions. About moving in together. I would expect nothing less. I need my own space, for when things get overwhelming. The second room can be your office. I need to maintain some routines. They're not negotiable. We'll build our schedule around them. And if I'm terrible at cohabitation, then we'll figure it out. Together. Like we figure out everything else." Jake stood up, walked around the table, and pulled her to her feet. "Michelle Brown, brilliant doctor, terrible at small talk. Excellent at everything that actually matters. Will you move in with me and let me spend the rest of my life bringing you coffee and arguing about user interfaces?" It was possibly the worst marriage proposal that wasn't technically a marriage proposal Michelle had ever heard. It was perfect. "Yes," she said, "but the pills in the interface are still unacceptable. They're placeholders." "They'd better be." He kissed her there in the restaurant, in front of everyone. And Michelle found that she didn't care who was watching. Her brain didn't spiral into nervousness about public displays of affection, or whether this was appropriate restaurant behavior. For once, her brain just let her be happy. Epilogue. 2 years later. Dr. Michelle Brown stood in the hospital conference room, watching as nurses and doctors interacted with their platform for the first time. HealthMatch had launched 6 months ago. They now had partnerships with 43 hospitals across 12 states. The diagnostic accuracy rate was 94%. They'd caught 17 rare diseases that had been previously misdiagnosed. They were actually doing it, changing healthcare, saving lives. "Stop looking so smug," Jake whispered, appearing beside her with 2 cups of coffee. "I'm not smug. I'm satisfied with our success." "You're smug. You have a smug face." "I don't have a smug face." "You absolutely have a smug face. It's adorable." Michelle accepted her coffee. Oat milk, no sugar, Extra hot, exactly right. Did you fix the latency issue in the emergency department module? Before breakfast. Did you finish the presentation for the medical board? Last night. Also, I scheduled our 6-month clinical review and booked the catering for the investor meeting and renewed our malpractice insurance. Of course you did. Jake kissed her temple. What would I do without you? Starve probably, and miss important deadlines. Accurate. A doctor approached them. Dr. Patricia Chen, head of internal medicine. Dr. Brown, Mr. Martinez, I wanted to thank you. Your platform just helped us catch a case of Cushing syndrome that we'd been missing for months. The patient's starting treatment today. Michelle felt that familiar warmth in her chest. This was why she'd gone into medicine. Why she'd pushed through the social difficulties and the sensory challenges and the constant feeling of being different. Thank you for giving us a chance, she said. After Dr. Chen left, Jake pulled out his phone. My mom wants to know if we're coming to dinner on Sunday, and she wants me to remind you that you promised to explain the entire diagnostic algorithm to my dad, who has decided he's interested in medical technology now. That's because I actually listen when he talks about his carpentry projects, and apparently that's rare. You've created a monster. He's going to talk your ear off about dovetail joints. I like dovetail joints. They're elegantly designed. Jake stared at her. You're perfect. You know that? Weird as hell, but perfect. We're weird together. The best kind of weird. Michelle looked around the conference room, at the platform they'd built, at the doctors they were helping, at the lives they were changing. Then she looked at Jake, with his messy hair and his patient smile and his genuine belief that two weird brains could change the world. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all statistics, against every logical reason it shouldn't work. They'd built something beautiful. Jake, Michelle said. Yeah? Thank you for knocking on my door that day, for believing in this, for believing in me. You knocked on my door, actually. You know what I mean. I do. He took her hand. Partners? Always. They had a company to run, a healthcare system to revolutionize, and approximately 17 things on Michelle's task list that needed immediate attention. But for now, for just this moment, Michelle let herself be happy. It was surprisingly easy when you had the right person standing beside you. Even if he did keep trying to sneak placeholder pills into the user interface. Those were definitely not staying. The end. I love making these videos for you. If you liked this story, then please like, subscribe to my channel, and switch on the notifications for more entertaining stories. Please also leave a comment for any story suggestions.